Last week, Bitcoin actually split in two over a proposal called BIP 110. A small group of nodes rejected the main chain and started their own. Then, within 8 hours, their new chain produced exactly 2 blocks and stopped. Meanwhile, the main Bitcoin network just kept on going, completely unaffected. This is the story of a Bitcoin fork that has almost no support, forced an actual split anyway, and immediately proved why that almost never works, especially in Bitcoin. BIP 110, formerly the Reduced Data Temporary Soft Fork, was a proposed one-year soft fork to Bitcoin, a temporary set of stricter consensus rules designed to restrict how much arbitrary, non-financial data could be embedded inside Bitcoin transactions. It targeted ordinals, inscriptions, BRC20 tokens, runes, and oversized OP return data, fields, and certain taproot scripting techniques that have been used to store images, text, and token data directly on the Bitcoin blockchain rather than for a straightforward payments. Technically, it was 7 consensus rules, capping most new transaction output at 34 bytes, limiting OP return fields to 83 bytes, and capping data pushes at 256 bytes. The proposal circulated first under an earlier name, BIP444, credited to the pseudonymous author Dayton Ohm, with Bitcoin developer Luke Dasher credited for the original technical draft and advice. It was formally assigned the BIP110 number in December 2025 and reached complete status in the official Bitcoin's BIP's repository on June 25, 2026. So how did it actually affect the Bitcoin network? Well, here's where this video updates the story. This is no longer hypothetical. On August 8, 2026, at block 961632, BIP110's mandatory signaling window opened exactly as scheduled. Nodes running BIP110 enforcing software began rejecting any blocks that didn't signal support for the new rules, and a pseudonymous group calling itself Roughnecks, mining through ocean pools at Datum protocol, stepped in to mine an alternative block at that exact height. That was the moment Bitcoin actually split into 2 chains, the dominant chain running under the existing rules and a new minority chain enforcing BIP110. The result was immediate and decisive. The BIP110 chain mined a second block, reaching height 961633 and then stopped completely within about 8 hours, while the main Bitcoin chain had actually already advanced by 48 more blocks. The BIP110 branch had produced nothing further. By August 10, the gap had widened to 111 blocks, with the enforcing chain still frozen at that same exact block and 0 additional signaling recorded on the main chain since the mandatory window began. Because that minority chain actually inherited Bitcoin's full mining difficulty, but only a tiny fraction of its actual hash power, at its current pace, some analysts estimate that it could take roughly 25 years to even reach its first difficulty adjustment, the point where its block times would naturally speed back up. There was also a genuine practical danger created by the split. Worth knowing, if you hold Bitcoin at all, because both chains started from the exact same transaction history, a transaction signed on broadcast on one chain can potentially be replayed on the other. Bitcoin developer Kevin Loic publicly warned that anyone attempting to sell or move coins on the minority fork coin market without properly separating their balance first risk inadvertently exposing the corresponding real Bitcoin on the main chain to being spent as well. The risk doesn't hand anyone control of your entire wallet, but it's a real concrete way this fork could have cost ordinary holders actual money if they weren't careful. And if you never touch or attempt to sell fork-related coins, well, you're not exposed to this risk at all. So why didn't miners support it? Well, the numbers stayed remarkably consistent all the way through to the actual mandatory activation. In the final difficulty period before the split, just 51 out of 2016 blocks, around 2.53%, signaled support for BIP110, nowhere close to the required 55% needed for a genuine miner-driven lock-in. Once the mandatory window began, signaling on the dominant chains dropped to essentially zero. The core reason remains economic. Ordinals, BRC20, and Runes transactions generate real fee revenue for miners, and restricting them directly cuts into that income. Structurally, it was also close to mathematically impossible for miner support to reach the threshold regardless. For mining pools, Foundry Digital, and Pool via BTC and F2 Pool controlled over 70% of Bitcoin's total hash rate, and none of them signaled support at any point in the process. The proposal also faced serious public opposition from high-profile figures. Michael Saylor's Strategy's executive chairman had published a detailed critique titled 110 Reasons BIP 110 is a Bad Idea ahead of the deadline, and once the split actually happened, and immediately stalled. He framed it as vindication. Bitcoins work exactly as designed. BIP 110 was free to fork, and the network was free not to follow. The result was decisive. About 99.85% of Bitcoin's hash power stayed with Bitcoin. Bitcoin Core also never endorsed or merged the proposal either, meaning it never had the backing of the network's dominant software client. So why wasn't it dying even with almost no support? Well, this is actually played out exactly as the mechanism was designed to. BIP 110 used a user-activated soft fork, or a UASF, the same activation approach used during Bitcoin's 2017 SegWit standoff. Unlike a normal soft fork that simply times out and disappears without enough miners signaling, a UASF's mandatory window doesn't ask for permission. At a predetermined block height, any node choosing to run the enforcing software starts rejecting non-compliant blocks regardless of what the majority of the miners are doing. That's exactly why almost no support didn't mean nothing happens. The code was built to force an actual on-chain event no matter how small the group backing it turned out to be. What made 2026 different from 2017 and what analysts had flagged as the key open question weeks before the split was whether BIP 110 had the same broad economic majority, exchanges, wallet providers, businesses that made the 2017 SegWit UASF actually succeed. Well, short answer, it didn't. No major exchange committed to the fork, no major mining pools signaled, and the moment enforcement actually began, the answer to does this mechanism work without that coalition arrived almost instantly. A two-block minority chain stalled within 8 hours, while 99.85% of the network hash rate simply kept operating as if nothing had happened, especially because of the minority chain inherited the difficulty from the main chain. So what happens now? The technical story looks close. The minority chain is effectively dead, with no realistic path back to relevance at its current hash power, and the main Bitcoin network never skips a beat. But the human story isn't actually over. As of August 10, 2026, the pseudonymous Roughnecks group backing the stalled chain announced plans to restart mining on it, and notably they're now pushing something far more radical than the original data restriction proposal. A change to Bitcoin's actual proof of work mining algorithm, intended to build an entirely separate mining ecosystem that wouldn't depend on the same ASIC miners and pools currently dominating the network. No activation date had been set for the idea, and it represents a dramatically bigger ask than the BIP 110 ever was. There's also an ongoing dispute within Bitcoin's developer community over whether Luke Dasher, given his connection to the original proposal, should continue serving as the BIP editor at all. A governance fight with no resolution yet. Well, the broader questions BIP 110 actually raised is who gets to decide what counts as legitimate use of Bitcoin's block space and whether consensus rules should ever be changed to exclude a category of technically valid fee-paying transactions. It didn't get resolved by this fork failing, but it got a very clear real-world data points that changes Bitcoin's rules without broad economic buy-in, produce a two-block chain and a decisive no from the network, not a successful upgrade. Whether that lessons holds the next time someone tries a similar move in Bitcoin, nobody can answer that yet. Let me know in the comments below what you think about the BIP 110 and how it failed. And if you guys like this content, make sure to check out my other videos here, and stay safe guys, stay curious, and I'll see you guys next time.